Welcome to Gyno Curious and Vulva Views with Amy and Allison. Please, during the taping today, you have something you want to ask, something you want to say, something you feel strongly about. I want to remind you to write us at comments@radiofreerhiniecliff.org or call us at 845-307-7446. We want to welcome Jessica Dixon to our show today. Jess is our first guest on Vulva Views.
Very exciting. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
We are thrilled.
Very much. We had been looking for the right females to jump on board, and particularly ones that have a unique story or have, I would say, a superpower about them. And I saw you and met you and thought, I've got to get this woman on the show. So I'm very excited that you're here.
I love that we recognize the power in each other and that we talk out loud about it. And I think it's a relatively new phenomenon, right? And so it's funny. I heard someone introduce, I was at a concert, a very small concert yesterday, and the gentleman who introduced the music was talking about Clara Schumann and about all of her achievements. And he said she was a busy woman. And I spoke up. I was like, she was an accomplished
That's
woman.
right.
So here we are to speak to Jess about your accomplishments and challenges and life, because as a mom, as a person who seeks wellness with fitness and nutrition, from the lens of a person in the healthcare industry, Allison and I thought you would be an interesting, achieved woman to speak to some of these things. One, because they're, quite frankly, things we all talk about: how to be fit, how to be well. How do we balance mom with work? How do we exist in the world of healthcare in today's world? So, Jess, if I may, just tell us about yourself. Tell the audience who you are.
I just turned 40.
Yay!
Welcome.
Thought that day would never come.
40s are the best.
They are great.
I do have to say, I think this decade, for me, is going to be a really different one, and I think a lot better one. I'm a much different person than I am now than I was a few years ago, especially in the last 2 years, I'd say. I definitely have gone through a lot of changes, definitely finding myself in the last 2 years, becoming very different. And
can you tell us more specifically what you've realized about yourself or what you see when you talk about those 2 years of change?
Self-discovery, self-awareness, things that I didn't know about myself, a lot of self-awareness. I guess self-awareness is the big thing.
Can you give us an example, what you weren't aware of, but now you are?
I also feel like 30s were the last decade to really give a shit about a lot of insecurities and other people's influences or opinions of you. I don't know if that's something you've experienced, but I remember waking up on my 40th birthday and thinking, I don't care, all of a sudden, which was like the greatest gift I could have ever been given or discovered on my own.
Yes, definitely self-love. That's a big thing.
Oh, for sure. And sadly hard to get to as a woman. But I view you as someone that absolutely has self-love. We mentioned earlier that you're very accomplished and you're busy and you are in the healthcare industry, but I see you taking care of yourself frequently, which I think is tremendous.
Yes, but that's also new.
Okay, all right. Still,
So again, in the last 2 years, I have, being the life that I've had in the last 13 years, I don't think that I would say that I had a lot of self-love. Especially when I've been a single mom for the last 8 years. And that's been a roller coaster. I've been very selfless, not putting myself first, not having self-care, self-love, doing the things that I wanted to do for me, that I thought that I can't do those things because then I want to be a good person. I want to be a good mom. The last 2 years, I think I learned to be like, no, I have to do X, Y, and Z. I need to do these things for myself because I think it's going to make me a better person and especially a better mom.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's tremendous that you're saying that it came to you a little bit later in being a mother, that it's more recent, because I know a lot of women that choose to give up a lot for themselves and they feel like life is over. And then they realize that 40 is not 40 is not 80. 40 is very young. I remember being a child and thinking like, oh no, 40? Like I'm going to be dead by the time I get to that.
That's my grandmother.
But really, exactly. I always say for me, 40s were not the end. They were more of the beginning. And so I appreciate how you say that this is something that you're just coming to. And also thankful that you said you gave up a lot because you thought it would make you a better mom and a better person. And I think that is an unfortunate misconception that many women, including myself, at moments believe is what you need to do to be a good mom. You have to sacrifice yourself. But really, in the end, the kids with the happier moms have the moms that are taking care of themselves.
Yes.
So would you give us a little background on what it is you do for work? Because you're a caretaker all around in many ways.
So clinically, I'm a medical assistant. So back in 2006, I went to trade school and went to medical assisting school, and I did that. I went right into pediatrics. Then I moved from primary care to urgent care, stayed in pediatrics. Then I moved from just doing clinical work, working like on the floor, seeing patients, triaging, things like that. Then I moved into management in my company 6 years ago.
Jess, can you just articulate what a medical assistant is? I think that most listeners have encountered MAs, but they're not really sure what that means.
Medical assistants are like a step below a nurse. So there's different scopes of practice in the medical field. So there's x-ray techs, there's medical assistants, there's nurses. Nurses have our LPNs and then RNs. So there's different types of those positions, and you fall within a scope. And when the scope, meaning by like a scope, is what you are able to do medically in that scope of practice. And what I do, I basically can do pretty much anything a nurse does, is that I just can't give medications.
Injections?
And can't give injections.
Okay.
So like in New York State, medical assistants can't give injections, but in some other states, they can.
Got it. Okay.
And most people wouldn't even know that I'm not a nurse because I've been in the field for so long that they just assume that I am.
You carry with you a level of expertise, and that's impressive.
I did go to nursing school, though.
You did? What was that you chose the medical assistant versus the path of nursing?
I was also super young. I was like, I have to go to school and do something. So
we've all been there.
Yeah. I'm like, all right, Jazz, let's stop the nonsense. We got to go to school and do something with ourselves. I was like, oh, let me go do this. It was a fast track, condensed program and get a certificate and get my certification. So when I was like, all right, I'll go into this. And then I went back. I decided to go back. I'm like, all right, I want to do something more and have something more income, more money. And then I decided to go back to college when my oldest son was 2.
Good for you.
Hard.
Did that, when full-time, was working full-time as a medical assistant, went back to school. Then I went all the way, went into my second semester of nursing clinicals. But then during my first clinical rotation, I decided to have another baby.
She just didn't have enough to do.
Everyone thought I was crazy. They're like, Jess, how are you going to have a baby? How are you going to get through clinicals? And I'm like, I'm fine. I can do this. I'm like, I'm good. Yeah.
They just punctuated that.
Yeah. No. I gave birth to my son on a Thursday, was back in clinicals on Monday morning.
Holy crap.
My professor, so Jess, when are you going to have this baby? And I stood up and I'm like, oh.
You're like, thanks a lot.
I had this baby.
Are you calling me fat?
Wow.
So it was not good for me to do that.
Yeah.
It was not a good time in my life. I was postpartum. I ended up finding out I had postpartum depression. So I started my next semester and I was completely like, not there, gone. Couldn't even sit in a 6-hour lecture and couldn't contain the information. And I failed my first exam. So I was like, you know what? I have to step out and be home with, my baby.
Yeah.
And I had gone back to work already too. I went back to work when my son was 6 weeks old.
Oh my gosh. You're one of those moms. I don't know how you did that. I had months off when I had my children. And even that, when I had to go back, was so devastating and terrifying for me.
I didn't want to. I had to.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that it's such a reflection of this country.
Oh, it sure
And that
is.
there isn't mandatory a year off as in other countries for new moms is just, it's such a frustrating reality in this country. And so I pat you on the back and give you a hug because I just know how hard that is. Just from a hormonal point of view, a physical point of view, and then the
Yeah.
emotional component if you're having depression or just the lack of time with your baby. It's just so hard, so hard.
Yeah, I did have a sense of relief, like when I decided to drop out of school. I was like, okay,
Good.
I can at least be home with my baby.
Yeah.
But I still had to go back to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it wasn't because I had to, because my company forced me. It's because my home life was not okay.
Yeah.
So I had to go back to work for financial reasons.
And you're not alone. It's
Yeah.
such a common challenge for women.
As is postpartum depression. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that, because I really feel strongly about removing the shame that surrounds postpartum depression, because it is something that is almost impossible to avoid for many, particularly because of the shifting hormones and the sleep deprivation and the nursing or just whatever it is you're doing. Back to what Amy had said is that this country needs to treat new mothers more, I don't want to call it patience, but really there needs to be a care, a nurturing, an attention for at least 12 months that this country does not provide. So I thank you for mentioning that, because it is something a lot of people feel embarrassed to admit that they had.
Yeah, up to 75% of women postpartum will have something we call the blues, and then
Yeah.
about 15% will develop this depression. It's very real. And then there's thankfully a smaller group, about 1 in 1,000, who will develop postpartum psychosis. So these changes are extremely challenging. And when you don't have an infrastructure, whether it be at your work or in your home, to help you move through these states, these moods, it's incredibly hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I never told anybody either.
You're not alone about that either.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
And I
So
just
much
want to
later.
add that to what Amy said before I ask you a question, is that those statistics are accurate, but are only the people that come forward and
That's
say
right.
that they have it.
That's
so
right.
the
Wow.
likelihood from in the office, and I've actually done research on this and written papers, it's likely 100% that every woman and men as well go into depression after a child is born into a relationship or into a family. It's just so many people are afraid of admitting, because your baby's supposed to be joy and love and the best thing you've ever done. And they are all of those things, but it is one of the greatest life transitions that you can experience. But on to brighter subjects. I want to hear, because now you are someone who does take care of herself, and you still take care of other people. So what was that moment or time that became pivotal for you, where you realized, I've got to start caring for myself?
After I started karate.
Jess, by the way, is a fantastic and talented martial artist. This is how I met her.
2 years in, and I don't know, after I started karate, I don't know, I think I went through like an awakening, if you might say. Because when you're doing karate, you have to be very deliberate and focused, and it's very purposeful, and there's you have to have a lot of self-control. Look at yourself, go within. I dealt with some rejection around that time, and I was like, I'm not used to rejection. So I was like, what is this?
Romantic rejection. Are we
Yes.
speaking about romantic?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, that bruised my ego a little bit. And I don't know, I feel like I'm like, just started to do things a little bit at a time. I was like, to test myself. I was like, all right, I'm going to deplug from social media for a while and see if that's something that would help, that's going to help me. So I did that for a month, and I was like, wow, I did that for a month. I'm like, then I was like, all right, I'm going to stop drinking. I gave up drinking. I'm like, let's see if I can go without that. Then I was able to do that. I was like, and I started to see things more clearer, more differently.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, you know what? We'll talk about the whole fitness thing. I follow a lot of fitness influencers, bodybuilders, and I was, I've always admired them, and I was like, oh, I just want to do that. And I'm like, I had already had a coach just for everyday life, nutrition coach, who would just help me with my fitness and my nutrition. I told him, I was like, I want to do a show. I want to compete. And he's okay. And I made that decision and went into a full-blown prep starting, that was May of 2022. And since then, I decided I was going to do that.
I love that you describe those, if you will, I'm going to use the word small achievements. And I don't mean that they're small in quality. I mean that they're, if you will, small in nature. How do I put it? That you decided to do something that you could achieve. So often we set out these goals for ourselves that are enormous that we ultimately fail. And again, it doesn't help us. It just makes us feel less and less about ourselves. So you set out these goals that were achievable. Maybe you didn't know that they were achievable, but they were. Clearly they were for you. And I love this. It just kept adding to this wonderful hill of achievement and capacity and self-awareness and confidence that allowed you then to step into the martial art world that clearly has propelled you into a much greater arena of competition, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, and that you did them one at a time.
Yeah.
Because that, you said that. First I tried this and it worked and I could do it. Right. And then I tried this and it worked and I did it. And so many people, like the New Year's resolution, for example, they want to do everything at once. And that's basically like driving into a brick wall at 90 miles an hour.
It becomes too overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's too much change.
And I knew for me that I had to do something small because my life is so chaotic to begin with. And I'm like, let's not go 100, Jazz. Let's do this small and then pull the trigger when I know I can handle it.
Well, it's so funny. I love the idea of, your tempo is really fast. Allison and I have agreed that we both move at a very rapid pace. And that one of the things that I'm learning as a 62-year-old woman is just to say, I don't need to move that fast anymore. Yeah. And it's not that I can't. I can. It's really about, I choose not to. I want to smell the roses. I want to just empower myself with a little bit of spaciousness, if you will. And I can do that because my kids are out of the house. It wasn't possible when my kids were in the house. We're all at different ages here, and I want to point that out to our listeners, that part of what we're also talking about is not just making a decision to do one thing at a time in terms of shifting one's life, but that life around us has to shift too, and that when kids are at home, there's just different demands on you physically, emotionally, time, etc. So yeah, I admire all of this about you. Yeah.
And so sorry, I'm just jumping back because you said you're bodybuilding. I find this fascinating. And I know some people think that's extreme, but I think it's just another one of these things that's almost like a meditation because it requires so much discipline. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that, but also you have 2 boys, right?
Yes.
I would love to hear what your sons think about this.
They don't have much to say. My little guy, Joey, he's only 8 and Nick is 13 and I think he's like low-key thinks I'm cool but doesn't want to admit it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
They saw me go through the whole process, but it's, yes, the amount of discipline it took, I had to really go in hermit mode. And I made a lot of sacrifices doing that between dieting and in the gym. So I was in the gym 5-6 days a week for hours and hours, and there's, you can't, the nutrition portion is the most key part of it. I had to go to a wedding a week before my show and I ate nothing. You know what I mean? I was eating rice cakes at my best friend's wedding that's been friends for, and I was the girl at the wedding that knew that she's the bodybuilder because she's eating rice cakes at my wedding. Things like that. I didn't go, you have to make a lot of sacrifices. I didn't go out to eat. I didn't go out with friends. I wasn't drinking. You know what I mean? It changed my social setting. And it also changed my group of friends.
Did you find that was for, I don't want to say better or worse in case some of your friends who you used to party with are listening, but did you find that the new people around you were the ones that were the supporters for who you wanted to become and what you wanted to do?
Yes, because you want to surround yourself with like-minded people.
Right.
And sometimes a lot of people that, are still supportive of you and they're not like-minded, but they're still going to be supportive. But there's going to be those people that just don't get it. They
Right.
just don't understand. So when I started to gear away from certain things, your relationships change. And not because you got into a fight or something bad happened, or just because when you evolve, relationships change.
I think it's very important for people to hear, especially those who may be trying to do something like give up drinking or a habit or something that they feel is detrimental, but they fear that maybe, the change in relationships or the loss of certain relationships. Is there anything that you would say to someone that says, gosh, I want to stop drinking and going out, but it's really hard for me to think that I won't be able to be with those people?
You have to just do it.
Mm.
You have to just rip off the Band-Aid and just do it. There's no knowing what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, if you want to work on yourself, I feel like you have to commit. You have to fully commit, and you have to just do it and not worry or care about what's going to happen moving forward, because then you're not going to do it.
You keep making excuses.
Right.
Or second-guessing yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're always going
Yeah.
to have the excuses. They
Yeah.
come up all the time. I make excuses now.
We all do.
The other day, I made 10,000 excuses why I don't want to go to the gym.
You got there. I saw the pictures.
I do get there. But I do a lot of, I make a lot of excuses in my own head. And it goes back to discipline.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Discipline is what keeps you going. Discipline is what gets you to a goal.
It's interesting. I was reading today about confidence. And what this writer said was that confidence is really derived from practice. And the example they gave was that they love a certain kind of cake. And when they first started making the cake, they looked at the recipe over and over again, and they got better and better until they got to a point where they didn't need to look at the cookbook anymore. They knew how to make the cake. And moreover, they got to a point where the cake came out so well each and every time that they began to be creative around the cake. And they realized, I have confidence about making this cake. And I know it's a silly example, but it really struck home. It's practice, it's discipline. It's about doing something over and over again and realizing the benefits, realizing the losses, being okay with the benefits and the losses. And really, again, it's about coming home to yourself, to really saying, what do I want to feel confident about? What do I want to be practiced in? And that's what I hear you describe. And there is so much loss with change, even if it's positive change. And certainly one of the things we realize in our midlife is that people in our lives serve different functions. We have a friend for this, we have an acquaintance for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't make these people better, worse, or have different quantitative value in our lives. They just have different values in our lives or different places in our lives. And that's okay, as we have with other people too. So there's a maturing, there's an understanding, there's a willingness to say, there's risk here, but I'm willing to take the risk. As long as I'm not hurting someone else, I'm willing to go there.
Yeah, that's just that risk. That word risk that's the big one.
Scary, isn't it?
For sure, definitely.
Yeah.
I've taken a lot of risk in a lot of things.
Yeah. Do you find that more often than not, taking those risks have brought you to a place of wellness, of contentment?
Yes. And sometimes those risks, the outcomes were not what I wanted and what I expected, but definitely I learned something from it.
Exactly.
Took something from it.
Exactly. You have something to say. I saw you say something else.
Oh, I took a break. I went like that.
You should have seen your eyes.
Did you have something
I
you
was
wanted
going to
say?
ask another question.
Go for it.
Okay, sorry. I wanted to ask if you could share sort of your perspective on looking at yourself or the way you've noticed other people viewing you differently since you've taken these risks, because we're talking about that risks are very scary, but like you said, on the other side, it was worth it even if it wasn't the outcome you expected. But is there a general view that you would say you have on the world, or you think the world has on you after all of this change?
One of my biggest issues is caring about what people think.
Mm.
Mhm.
It used to bother me, eat me up a lot. caring. I learned going through these changes and doing these things for myself that you can't care about what people think. You just can't. You have to just keep going for it. And the people that care and the people that view you and they are positive and supportive, they're going to tell you that. People will watch you and follow you, but they don't care and they don't support you. That's, one thing I'm good, I don't know if it's good or not, about social media is that people watch you, but they don't care. They don't support you. I have the same people that I know that are caring and supportive, and they comment or they like, they heart, they see me. They're like, hey, I saw you on such and such, or you did. Those are the people that I feel I would care about how they view me. Not the people that don't.
That you're more discerning. I think we all become more discerning as we get older. Don't you think, Allison?
Oh, yes. I don't know if it's... I think it must be just a combination of adversity, experience, exhaustion, because caring what other people think is absolutely exhausting. But there also is a freedom and a confidence that comes with aging, which perhaps is like that cake recipe that we've just done it so many times that we don't need to do it anymore.
But I think you bring up something really interesting, Jess, is this issue around social media. And I want to remind everyone out there, when they listen to Gyno Curious and Vulva Views, we want you to like us. We want you to follow us. We want you to give us 5 stars and make comments, please, because what it does for us is it helps promote the show. It helps promote Radio Free Rhiniecliff. It just expands our audience so more and more folks can hear someone like Jess talk about her life's arc and the lessons she's learned and lessons that she can share with you. But then there's this other part of it, the shadow of it on a personal level around the so-called friends that people have on social media and what to do with all of that and how it makes some people feel. And it could be really depleting. It can be really supportive, but in kind of this superficial way. But I'm just going to put that out there. I don't think we need to discuss it per se, but it's an interestingly complex time vis-a-vis technology.
I will say this. I did have a friend that I had for a very long time. She was somebody that I was friends with who was my best friend for a long time. And I thought that we would go through our whole lives together. Nope, that did not happen. But as I was going through this change, our relationship, our friendship changed. And I do a lot of posting. I'm always posting on stories. If I'm going to the gym, if my food I'm eating, I'm posting it, posting quotes. And I don't do it because I want to be like, look at me, or doing it for clout or anything like that. It's just to be like, hey, I'm doing this. And if somebody catches it and they're like, oh, I'm going to do it too. And that's the whole point, is to be inspiring, not to be look at me or anything like that. And she had commented on one of my gym posts and said that I needed to get over myself.
Ugh. Ooh. That was not personal. That was something about her.
I know. But I was like,
why'd you have to go there?
Just why?
Yeah.
And I was like, and now I definitely know that our relationship is over. Our friendship is over. And it had already been, on thin ice, and we were, we changed, and it's just not the same, but why do you have to make it go out like that?
Yeah, one would have hoped she would have called you up on the phone and said, hey, Jess, I want to talk to you about something. I'm feeling uncomfortable about how you're posting or what you're posting. And it makes me uncomfortable, or whatever her comment or criticism was. But to, again, use the World Wide Web as a bulletin board for her around that, I think wasn't respectful or kind. Yeah.
And because why would something that I've been inspiring to others make you feel uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Well,
because people...
If you're not happy with yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't place hate or be mean or rude to others because I'm jealous or there's something that I feel about myself,
I find you inspiring. I actually, after you posted that, I think it was like grilled chicken and chopped up cucumbers and tomato or something, I was like, damn, I need to eat cleaner again. I've been like, from the holidays and then all of the family birthdays, there's been like cake everywhere. I actually took a giant leftover piece of sheet cake today and threw it in the trash. I was like, I have to stop picking at this.
My meals are so boring that they're so boring, and then I find ways to trick my brain into thinking that it's something fabulous because
Is that the key? Because I wanted to ask, if I may, just to give a little advice to people that are listening to you and all of these accomplishments, but that may want to take that little step that you mentioned, or the first step. I would love if you would share a little bit of advice for someone who's like, gosh, I really want to start being better or being healthier, but I don't know how to begin.
To start off small. See, we go back to things that are small. You can't make big changes when you've never done it before. I tell people, I'm also a fitness nutrition coach. I do that on the side. I have an online coaching business that I do nothing with because I don't have the time to market it, and you have to constantly post on social media, and this, the industry is so saturated, it's just hard. So I do it for fun, and if I get clients, I'm happy to take on a client. But I always tell them, I'm like, because most people, when they start off on like a health fitness journey, they're like, they want to go to the gym. That's not the right way to do that.
Why?
Because most of your changes come from your diet.
Can you go further on that comment?
So I'm a macro coach. I teach clients how to eat, how to track their macros, which is your carbs, your proteins, and your fats. So your macros make up your calories. So like your calories is like a dollar bill. I explain it to people, and your macros are the quarters that make up the dollar.
Fascinating.
I really like that.
Me too. That's straightforward and
understand.
Yeah, it is.
Huh.
So a lot of people always think there's this big misconception on what you're supposed to do. People are like, I'm going to cut out carbs. I'm not going to eat this. I'm not going to eat that. What I do as a coach is that I teach people how to eat appropriately and consistently. And you don't have to be restrictive. The idea is it to not be restrictive so that you can sustain it long term.
Can you say a little bit more about that? Because I think I understand, but I'm not sure everybody out there listening knows what you mean by that.
So what I mean by...
Give an example if you can.
So you're not... Yeah. So people are like, so you want to still be able to eat pizza or eat a donut or do the things that you love to do and enjoy.
How did you know I love pizza?
Who doesn't?
You just work it into your diet. And you have to learn how to track macros is what you have to do.
For example, you might say to me, Amy, you could have pizza, but you need to do it in what way? How would I integrate pizza into my daily meals or my weekly meals so that it's balanced with the other good foods?
So everyone has their set of macros that you would eat for the day. And it's I calculate it based off of what you already do.
So how many carbs, how many proteins,
right.
How many, okay.
And so then you would track it, and then you're like, I want to have pizza today.
Okay.
And then you track it in there, and you're like, okay, so this is now I have to work around this. So by doing that consistently, you learn then eventually to intuitively eat. And so then you automatically, it just becomes natural to you. So like me, for instance, I don't have to track to sustain long-term results. I just do it naturally. But right now I'm tracking because I'm in the middle of training. So I'm a lot more, I want to be precise in what I'm doing. But now and it becomes habit. I lost a lot of bad habits, picked up a lot of good ones since learning how to do this. And now I can do it intuitively. So what I want to do is teach people how to eventually intuitively eat and work those things into your diet and know that you can sustain your results long term.
What I love about this way of talking about diet is so often women in my office will say, okay, what do you think the diet is for me? And first of all, the word diet, it's just challenging. It's so stigmatized and it's got so many different meanings to everybody. In the context of the medical world, diet just means how you eat. That's all it means.
That's how I view it.
But often they'll say, I just, for example, love pizza. Are you telling me I can never have pizza again? I can't possibly do that. And I often will say, no, I'm not talking about never having pizza. I'm just suggesting you don't have pizza morning, noon, and night. I'm suggesting maybe you only have pizza once a week. And that if you have pizza, if you're going to a party and you're going to have pizza for dinner, then maybe you look at your lunch and your breakfast vis-a-vis how many carbs or how much cheese you've already had, etc. And I think that's what you're sharing with us is this way of looking at eating that's not so restrictive that people can't find pleasure in some of those not so good foods, but that you, again, intuitively develop a way of life that integrates awareness, a consciousness about what we're putting into our mouth, because so many people eat unconsciously. They just grab and literally, it's a reflex. They just put it in their mouth. They don't think about it. Often it doesn't make them feel good, but then they forget the connection between the hot dog and indigestion and have another hot dog and they experience it again, or whatever it is.
Dirty water dogs.
Yeah. I think that's what you're talking about too, is just being aware in not an oppressive way, but in a way that's just, I don't know, it's just this beautiful dance in your life. And it's a part of what maintains your wellness and a way of being.
Do you have a website to share with us, by the way, speaking of? Because the way you do speak about it is very calming and eloquent and sounds very approachable. So if anyone's listening that does want to be your client, how would they get in touch with you?
Through my social media. I don't have a website just yet.
Tell us.
So what would that
be?
The North Star Life.
North Star Life?
So that's my coaching business name. The North Star Life Macro Coaching.
Okay. Great. And again, it's Jessica Dixon who's joining us today. It's Dickson?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, because there's lots of ways of looking people up. So I wanted to make sure I had the correct spelling.
I like how you just said yes, ma'am, by the way. Did you pick that up from karate?
Yes,
we do this. We say yes. No, but I bow to people in the supermarket.
Stop lying. Don't.
I actually said yes, ma'am, to Jen before. Jen was like, do you mind if I scoot you here? And I was like, yes, ma'am. And then I'm like, oh, what are you doing, Elsie?
But I don't like to be called ma'am.
Oh, I don't either, because it ages me. And someone did it the other day. They were like, thank you, ma'am. I was like, how dare you? Why am I not Miss anymore? But whatever. I don't mind it in the dojang, but I have noticed recently when people start to call me ma'am that I have a reaction to it, and it's not a happy one.
They call me Miss Jess at the karate school, so that's okay.
Damn you.
Well, it is ma'am, yes ma'am, no ma'am, but most of the time it's Miss Jess, so I'm like, okay.
Fair enough.
So funny how loaded those ways of speaking to each other are. It's great. So I want to come back to an issue that Allison and I talk about on a personal level, professional level, is this reality that most women are working outside their home and many women have kids as well. And in my day, when I first started being a mom and working, there was this, finding the balance. And I used to say, balance? Like, what the heck is balance? I'm always on one side of the seesaw or another, but I am never in a place that it's in balance. And that was just my response to it. And I used to console myself and say, first of all, I just have to be prepared that each day is different. Like I used to think, okay, I've got the babysitter in place. I go to work, at this time and come home that everything was plotted out. And of course, the next day the babysitter would be sick or my car would would not work, or I was asked to come in for an emergency and it's okay. All those plans were thrown to hell. So I think so many of us struggle with this, try to figure it out, try to find language around it, know that it changes day to day. Can the three of us talk about this a little bit? Because I think it's such a universal, issue that's of interest and to all of us, no matter how old we are. Even if my kids are out of the house, I still have to figure out, okay, how do I integrate them into my days, so to speak?
This is a big deal because I've worked with mental health and women particularly for quite some time. And a lot of them will come in saying, I want to give it 100%. I want to give it 100%. I'm going to give this 100%. I'm going to give it this 100%. And I will say, similarly to what you said about the seesaw constantly rocking, is that there's only one 100%. And so if you're giving all of these things 100%, that's 500%. And so you want to look at each thing that you approach in life as getting a certain percentage during the day based on what is most important for you that day or what outcome is most important that day. So sometimes you give your spiritual health 50% and you give 25% of your mental health and your physical health. And then the next day it's 100% to your mental health. But that there has to be fluidity and there has to be an ability to let go as well, because we do have this pressure on us. And we've talked about it before, to just keep going and going. And if we stop, we consider ourselves as failures. But knowing that this is not something that has to have every single ounce of us all of the time at the same throttle, but instead you wake up and you choose what's going to get the greater percentage, what is something that you can let go a bit that day. And at the end of the day, you still reach 100%. It's just that you've divided the pie, more or less.
Jess, how does that sound to you?
I definitely agree with that. That also goes with doing small things. You can't,
Right.
It always goes back to doing the little things. You have to do little things here, little things there to be able to get through. Because otherwise, I would never get through my day if that was the case.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be something that throws a wrench in it. There's always going to be something that throws a curveball.
So maybe that's the big overarching message to all of us, is that we only have so much control, even for those of us who love control, full control.
Delicious.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think all the women in this room are of that.
And her eyes are like lighting up. Oh, 2 thumbs up she gave us.
And we're fixers too. We're all fixers. So it's really, again, about understanding that this is a fluid concept, that we will sometimes not do it perfectly. In fact, often we may flounder, but that it's the intention, if you will. It's the awareness. It's the choosing small things, as Jess is describing, and each day reevaluating and asking yourself, okay, if you're going to use the percentage method, what percentage do I need to give to work today versus my kids today versus the meal I have to prepare for the family of 90?
Oh, God.
Yeah, I know.
Family of 90.
I know. We've all probably had to think about, do I want to prepare food for this whole group, or do I need to ask everybody to bring something?
Mhm.
Right? So it's a learning curve. It's a learning curve.
Yeah, I don't think we ever going to stop learning.
I hope that's true. I really hope that's true.
I want to just bring in a quote that I saw earlier that everything you're saying is reminding me of. And I apologize because I've seen this quote multiple times, but I don't really know who wrote the quote. You can certainly look it up and let me know, but I didn't want to say the wrong name. But it essentially is, in this lifetime, if you do not choose to make time for physical health, mental health, and spiritual health, you will eventually be forced to make time for illness. I think that is so powerful, and I get chills even when I repeat it, because it is one of those awakenings that you mentioned before, Jess, that, oh my gosh, if I don't invest now, likely something will come over me that I have no control over later.
Jess, you have any comments that you want to share with the audience before we say thank you and so long?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. We talked about a lot of different things today, so I'm so grateful for your openness.
This was a really, this is a fun experience. I promised myself that when I was going through all of this and working on myself, that I would, continue to do things that are new. That's how I'm going to grow. That's how I'm going to be different. I definitely never thought that I would be sitting here with you 3 ladies on a podcast 2 years ago. But see, that's just, you just don't know where your life is going to go. You just don't know. You can't, I feel like we are constantly worrying about the future and what we don't know. And then we're missing out on, and we're, worrying about the past, what's going to happen in the future. And we should be focusing on the now, living in the present. And I've been really trying to be present in my life now.
And I just want to add, you're always yourself, which is why you stand out and which is why you're here with us, because that's something that a lot of people have trouble with, just being their genuine selves and not trying to be like anyone else. I just want to add to what you said, always be yourself. It's a tough world with social media and all these influences and influencers, but I commend you for being yourself.
Thank you. Sometimes I think I'm like, who am I? I'm not anyone to rave about, or who's going to listen to me, or why does anyone care about what I would think? And you have to just drop that ego and just go for it.
We're really good at the imposter syndrome, where we don't feel like we have enough,
Right.
give enough, good enough. And I'd like to suggest that I've had enough of that we've all had enough of that us, particularly women, but men have this issue too, that we have to find that confidence, that capacity to be in the here and now and relish each and every lesson and know that even if it's one small thing that we can share with someone else, that's the gift. That's the gift. So thank you, Jess, for joining us again. Allison and I are so happy that you joined us today.
Yes, such a gift. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Vulva Views. I am Amy Novak, gynecologist.
And I'm Allison Chawla, psychotherapist.
I want to thank our producers, Matty Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud, and the Epicurean for having us here as their guests. And again, do not hesitate to let us know your thoughts and your comments at comments@radiofreerhiniecliff.org or call us at 845-307-7446. Please give us 5 stars, thumbs up, comments, anything that you can help us spread the word about Vulva Views. We'd be so grateful.
Thank you for listening to Vulva Views.